So welcome to the enterprise-wide employee well-being workshop. The vision of the employee well-being team is to create the culture and environment where our employees feel supported in all aspects of their work and life, allowing our people to do their best work. And in order to best support you, we have a variety of resources available at Wellbeing Central internet site. And you can find Wellbeing Central by going to the Mayo Clinic internet homepage, selecting Health and Wellbeing, and then Wellbeing Central. So there are a variety of resources for you. You can find the newsletter, the Wellbeing Index there, along with virtual coaching connection groups or virtual workshops. In addition, there are resources to foster peer support and work units such as the HELP program, the Champion program, recognition resources, and the Supervisor Toolkit. You know, during this challenging time, we are going through so many changes, and yet one thing remains the same, and that's our Mayo Clinic values. And it's so important to the employee well-being team that we are offering you resources that foster our Mayo Clinic values, especially fostering teamwork, offering one another compassion and healing during this difficult time. And so grateful to have Margaret Gall here to speak on mindful eating at work and home. Margaret is a registered licensed dietitian, nutritionist, certified wellness coach, and an instructor in nutrition within the College of Medicine. She has worked in the field of nutrition and dietetics for over 25 years. In the clinical setting, Margaret provides consults within the Division of Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Metabolism and Nutrition. Throughout the years, Margaret recognizes the tremendous role nutrition has on health and the need to make the nutrition message relevant and practical. So glad to have you here today, Margaret.
Thank you, Bridget. I'm excited to share some nutrition nuggets on this topic of mindful eating. In today's world of multitasking, eating while doing other activities can just seem to be the norm, whether it's eating while working or in front of the television. Being truly present while eating can be elusive. For many, and myself included, I have to say that during my lunch meal, I'm often doing work, catching up for what the afternoon might look like. So it's hard to be a mindful eater, but I'm very glad that you all are here today to hear some tips on how we can be a more mindful eater. You might be wondering, what can mindful eating do for me? I was reflecting on that question, and I would say that a mindful eating approach may help you eat only when you're hungry, may help you identify when you are full versus stuffed. It may also promote healthier responses to emotional eating, such as stress and anxiety, and it might help with weight control as well. The objectives for today are listed here on the slide. I do want to share with you that we will practice a mindful eating approach with the group activity. Before we begin talking about mindful eating, I want to talk about the opposite, mindless eating. Mindless eating has been described as unconscious eating. I like to say an unawareness of eating, unaware of the what, how, and why am I eating. As a dietitian, I do counsel patients on what to eat, nutritious foods. But I also inquire about the how am I eating. Am I engaged in distracted eating? Or am I present while eating? Do I savor each bite? Am I a quick or a slow eater? Why am I eating? Is it hunger or non-hunger triggers that direct my eating? So let's take a look at triggers that may lead to mindless eating. We have a poll question about identifying triggers, and the triggers in the poll are the same listed here on the slide. So please take a moment to reflect on what are some triggers that may lead to mindless eating. A trigger can be defined as something that sets a series of events or behaviors in motion. Triggers can be negative or positive in nature, and they could lead to overeating or choosing unhealthy food options. Again, some non-hunger triggers are listed here, and I see from the poll that Emotions rank fairly high as one of the triggers. And in my practice as a dietitian, I have to say emotions tend to be one of the main triggers for potentially mindless eating. People can be a trigger, as some of you indicated in the poll. Um, Perhaps it's a coworker that brings in treats and insists that you eat them, and you kind of feel obligated to have the treat. You don't want to offend the coworker. Perhaps it's a certain place that you find yourself eating more mindlessly. Maybe it's the break room. Maybe it's meetings even that might have not so healthy foods available, like maybe donuts. Perhaps it's even the time of the day. I see in the poll here that about 46% say time of the day directs their trigger to eat. The time of the day could be a break time when you just associate break with eating even when you're not hungry. Perhaps it's the middle of the night when you can't sleep and you feel food would comfort you and get you to fall back to sleep again. As noted in the poll, 73% indicated emotions drive their eating. Common emotions that I hear as a dietitian counseling those to eat more mindfully, the triggers tend to be stress, anxiety, depression, as well as maybe boredom. Certain foods and social events can direct eating, as well as the proximity of foods. Keeping the candy dish on top of the desk or in a drawer, having easy access to trigger foods can make it more challenging to engage in more healthy eating behaviors. Triggers can certainly be complex, and we will address how to challenge some of these triggers shortly. As we just talked about triggers, I want to present this behavior chain that has some triggers that we identified. We have the emotion, stress. We have maybe some unhealthy food choices in close proximity to work, maybe coffee and donuts available at a meeting or in a break room. So I want to reflect on how this behavior chain can lead to some negative self-talk and feelings like failure. And then later on, we will show this behavior chain again and discuss ways that we can break some links in this chain so this domino effect doesn't occur. So I'll give you an example of this behavior change scenario here. You woke up stressed. Perhaps you're thinking about work. Um, a lot of things going on in everyone's life. You woke up stressed, don't have time for breakfast. You get to work. Maybe there's coffee and donuts in the break room or some perhaps more unhealthy item that you grab. You then feel guilt, shame. Dang, I was seeing that dietitian Margaret for weight control, and now I'm eating donuts. I feel bad that I ate those donuts. So then you decide to skip lunch because I had so many calories from the donuts. Or maybe you just simply didn't plan ahead and you didn't have a lunch to bring to work. Now, mid-afternoon, you're hungry. You skip lunch. So you're starving. And maybe it's your break and you go into the break room and there's the vending machine there and you may get a not so healthy food item. Then some more negative self-talk comes. There goes the day. I don't feel like walking. I think I'll just stop by and get some fast food. Again, maybe you didn't plan ahead to have an evening meal. So now we're eating the fast food. We're sitting on the couch and some more negative self-talk comes. I failed. So this whole chain of event started, we might say, in the very beginning of that first link. Maybe you woke up stressed. You skipped breakfast. So we will talk about some ways to challenge these triggers and how we can break the links momentarily. The concept or the approach of mindful eating can help manage some of those triggers that we just identified. And what does it mean to eat mindfully? Well, first, let's discuss what mindfulness is. It's being aware in the present moment, on purpose, and without judgment. And I'm going to repeat, without judgment. The actual act of eating mindfully, it's doing nothing else while eating. You identify a place to eat, your table, your desk, but you eat without distractions, no computer, no phone. It focuses your attention on what you're eating so that you're engaging all the senses, the smell, the texture, the taste of the food. You're appreciating each bite of food or sip of beverage. Let's reflect for a moment on how mindfully you are right now when it comes to eating. So I have a few questions here that I'll read, and I want you just to take a moment to reflect on your response to these questions. Number one, what else are you doing while you're eating? Again, are you in the present moment or are you distracted? And that can lead to eating more than you intended. Also, how long does it generally take you to eat a meal? Do you eat in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 20 minutes? The longer you take to eat a meal, the longer your senses have to fully experience that meal, noticing those smells, the textures, the taste of the food. You may find that you might eat less as you notice more, since this allows time for your body to feel more satisfied. Number three, where is your attention as you eat? Are you too busy to notice what you're doing while you're eating and how much you've eaten? Are you distracted while you're eating such that you aren't noticing those smells, the taste, the texture of the food? And how do you know when you've eaten enough? Is it when you feel so full that you can't eat another bite, kind of stuffed? Or when you have cleaned your plate? And that may be reminiscent of being told at a young age, clean your plate. Or perhaps you haven't even thought about, I don't know what directs my stopping of eating. And number five, how do you respond when you make a not so healthy choice for you? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel angry? Does negative self-talk develop? Or do you quickly put it out of your mind? So when you're eating, I want you to really think about your response of that eating episode. What are your thoughts? What is your emotional response? What is your behavioral response to eating? And I'm going to give you an example from myself. A trigger for me is nuts. So some of you might have indicated that a food is a trigger. And I love nuts, but I don't eat them mindfully. When I see a container of nuts, I'll eat a lot of them despite not being hungry. And unfortunately, I'm not eating them mindfully. As I said, I can eat them by the handful. And my initial thoughts after I do that, I'm like, what was I thinking? I know I did not practice mindfulness while eating those nuts. My emotional response, I'm ashamed. I'm like, dang, I talk about mindful eating to my patients, clients, and here I am not practicing it myself. So I feel ashamed. So I encourage you to try to tune in to these internal cues on why you're eating and paying attention to how you want to feel when you're beginning to eat and when you're ending your eating episode. I think it's time for me to take a break from talking about mindful eating and let's experience it. So if possible, if you can grab a small piece of food, that would be beneficial. as I read a narration on a taste of mindfulness. And if you want, you can close your eyes with that small piece of food in your hand as I read through this narration. And for those that do not have a piece of food, a piece of food available, consider doing this activity the next time you eat. So please hold this food in the palm of your hand or between your finger and your thumb. I want you to really focus on it. Imagine that you have never seen an object like this before. You don't even know if it's food. Next, I want you to breathe in and out a few times to help yourself really focus. Notice the color, the texture, and the shape. What does it feel like in your fingers? Next, smell it. What aromas are you noticing? Are they pleasant, unpleasant? Now bite slowly. Before you start chewing, I want you to notice what it feels like in your mouth. Slowly eat it and really focus on this act of chewing and then swallowing. What does it taste like? Savor the taste. Immerse yourself in the moment of tasting and swallowing, thinking of nothing else. Be in the present while eating. As you slow down this process of eating, it can help you become more fully aware of the actual experience of eating. I want to thank you for experiencing a taste of mindful eating. Um, I would like to reflect on what was easy or challenging about doing this activity. Did you find it difficult to eat slowly, especially once the food was put into your mouth? Did you find it challenging to not swallow immediately? So in the chat, feel free to share some comments about that activity. As I mentioned, we're going to turn our attention back to this behavior chain, but we're going to look at how to break some of these links so the end outcome won't be I failed, so I quit. We're going to challenge some of these triggers. So an approach to challenging behaviors is called the ABC approach, is one approach. And the ABC approach looks at what came first, the antecedent, the cause, the trigger, that then leads to the certain behavior, the B in the ABC approach. And finally, what the outcome is, the C, the consequence. So by focusing our attention on the causes, the antecedents or triggers, and coming up ways to minimize them, you can alter the potential behavior and the consequence. So for example, let's say you want to break the link at stopping for fast food. You might decide to just take a different route home that does not go by that fast food restaurant, which is the trigger, the antecedent for you to get the fast food, the behavior to eat the fast food, and then the consequence to maybe be, dang, I didn't want to eat that less healthy choice. I feel like I failed. Or perhaps you want to break the link of skipping the breakfast that may lead to having junk food later on. Then plan ahead. To break that link, plan ahead your lunch. Take leftovers from the night before. Similarly, if you want to break the link in the beginning of this chain, plan ahead for the breakfast. The night before, put out your bowl, your spoon, maybe the cereal. How about from the very beginning of this behavior chain, modifying the very first link? I woke up stressed. So perhaps the night before, you journal some thoughts, listen to some calming music to maybe help you sleep better. So there's multiple points in these behavior chains that can be broken to alter the outcome. And I'd like you to reflect on breaking a specific behavior chain at the earliest point, or what I would say is the weakest spot. Another approach to changing behavior is called the distraction approach. And this is a way to change behavior by focusing your attention on something else. So, for example, if you're sitting in front of the television and food commercials come on, they're the trigger for you to maybe get up and eat. Well, what I might suggest you do is get up during the commercials, but go into another room, walk into the other room. That way, you won't be tempted by those food commercials to get something to eat, and you took a couple steps for a little bit more activity. So both this ABC approach or the distraction approach are just two approaches of many that can maybe help change a behavior. We identified early on some triggers that can lead to mindless eating. How do we challenge them? Well, I could say, well, try to avoid the trigger. Yeah. For example, in that behavior chain, avoid going past the fast food restaurant, or at least try to limit some of the triggers. We may not be able to master all of them to keep on track all the time, though. I noticed in the poll, and as you heard me say, emotional eating due to stress, anxiety, whatever the emotion might be, is very common and can cause some more mindless eating to occur. So, what are some ways to soothe without food? Well, perhaps when you're stressed, you may think about some other activity that you enjoy that you could substitute instead of grabbing the food. Maybe it's listening to music, doing a craft, a puzzle. Maybe it's just calling a friend or simply taking a walk. But think ahead about substituting some alternative behavior than grabbing the food to soothe. Challenging negative self talk is difficult, and it can be different approaches to help that. And I'm going to share on the next slide some positive self talk that can help negate those negative self talk. But negative self talk can really sabotage some efforts to eating more mindfully. Some people have the all or nothing thinking pattern, black and white. Others have more unrealistic expectations. But by practicing this positive self talk, by eliminating words such as should, always, never, and reframing the outcome, that can be very beneficial to more mindful eating. And I'm going to give you an example. Some often, as a dietitian, I hear patients say, I want to lose weight. I'm never going to eat sweets again, or I'm never going to eat fried foods like French fries. And that's that all or nothing, that I will never eat this again. And so that can really set someone up for failure if they do engage in having some French fries now and then or a sweet. So I would challenge that negative self talk with saying, okay, maybe I did eat some French fries, but you know what? I will later on in the day make some healthier choices. I will not let eating that French fry turn all my habits into not so good habits. Okay? Don't let a lapse become a collapse. Okay? So, again, challenging negative self talk. It's going to be different for everyone. I mentioned about those words like never, always. So, try to incorporate a more compassionate attitude so that you're not good or bad by what you eat or good or bad by an outcome that you didn't desire. It's important also to create a healthy eating environment that would be more conducive to mindful eating, right? So keeping your distance in terms of trigger foods is a good strategy. So moving tempting foods away or out of sight. With the nut example, when I said that nuts were my trigger, I actually took the container of nuts that was sitting on the counter and I put it up in a high cupboard. And I'm like, okay, now out of sight, out of mind. But it wasn't out of mind. I knew it was in the cupboard. So I got a chair, got the nuts out again. So then I decided, gosh, I I feel like the nuts are controlling me. I can't control them. So I made that decision to not purchase the nuts. For me, then I don't have that trigger there. But everyone's gonna have a different approach to managing a trigger. But if it's easy access to a trigger food, you may want to try making it a little bit more difficult to engage in getting that trigger food by putting it a little bit more out of sight or out of mind. Also, using smaller utensils, plates can help with particularly portion control if you find that mindless eating then leads to overeating. So, using smaller plates, glasses, silverware. Okay. I also suggest using your non dominant hand when you're eating. So, I'm right handed. If I want to eat more mindfully, more slowly, I will use my left hand. Again, minimizing distractions is a key to mindful eating. So being aware in the moment as we just did the mindful eating activity. So turning off television, not eating by doing computer work, really creating a pleasant eating environment. And I'm going to suggest this for those that may be bringing their lunch to work. Instead of just a brown bag lunch, why don't you do a brown bag lunch, but up it up a notch by adding a linen napkin in the brown bag, maybe some silverware, not plastic, but silverware. And you lay out that linen napkin and you put your silverware there and you take time to really enjoy that food. Okay? Again, without distractions. To eat mindfully is important, but also to eat in a healthy foods. So I want to share just a couple tips on how to plan ahead for making healthier choices. It helps so much to plan ahead if you want to eat healthy. Relying solely on willpower, that willpower is going to go south. I tell patients and clients that willpower is like gasoline in a car, that eventually it's going to run out. It's difficult to sustain willpower on any given day. So think about planning ahead. How can I plan ahead not only to eat mindfully, but also to include healthy options? Okay. So the plate method you may be familiar with. I encourage you to go out to the choosemyplate.gov for more information on using the plate method for planning healthy meals. But think about this plate method for building healthy meals. Is half my plate more plant-based vegetables and or fruit, and a smaller quadrant for a grain or a starch serving, and some lean protein on your plate as well. So the plate method is just a tool to kind of reflect on, am I having some healthy meals? I encourage you to include at least 3 of the food groups at a meal. Also, think about packing healthy snacks kind of based on the plate, right? Having fruits and veggies available, already cut up and ready to go to bring to work or to have at home for a snack. I love shortcuts, and so I will often buy the salad greens already bagged up and washed. I've also bought in veggie trays with the veggies already cut up and ready to go. Frozen veggies, many of those are in my freezer. Frozen fruits, another good option. For some quick protein options, I have bought rotisserie chicken. I'll take the skin off of it. Cans of beans, legumes are another quick way to get some protein. I would rinse the beans before using them. Some of you that like to do batch cooking, that can really help with planning for leftovers so that you don't skip lunch and that you have food available for at least a couple meals during the week. So again, I encourage you to go out to this choosemyplate.gov. It's a wealth of information on nutrition. They have recipes, suggestions, and all the different quadrants you see there on the plate. I want to share with you now this acronym called HALT. I really feel like this HALT acronym kind of ties in this mindful eating. HALT is an acronym that stands for, as you can see, H is hunger, A, awareness, L, lifestyle, and T, timeout. Regarding the H, I want you to ask yourself prior to eating, am I hungry? Am I eating because of hunger, or is it the triggers? And we already discussed some of those triggers already. If you are not eating because of hunger, perhaps again, it is a non-hunger trigger driving that eating. So I want you to reflect on not only am I hungry, but why am I eating? Becoming aware of those triggers that lead to that eating. And then also look at your lifestyle. What's going on in my life, my environment that may influence my eating? Do I have a very hectic schedule, both at work and home? Do I have no time for making meals? Do I lack that planning of making meals? Do I lack energy, and I'm fatigued, excuse me. Do I lack energy and I'm so fatigued, I can't even think about planning meals? So reflecting on this HALT acronym can maybe help you think about the what, how, and why am I eating? I'm going to go back to the H for a moment. It says use the hunger scale. And you probably all are like, what's the hunger scale? That's on the next slide. So asking yourself, how hungry am I, by using this hunger scale? Okay. 1 very hungry, the red zone, 5 very full, stuffed. I want you to think about the next time you're eating, how hungry was I when I began eating? How hungry was I when I stopped eating? How often am I at the 3? I'm in a comfortable, satisfied state when I stop eating. Or do you cross over to the 5 often? I think you all would agree that, hunger can impact one's mood, maybe your performance at work, at home. If you are in the red zone, you're probably likely not at your best, physically or emotionally. So using the hunger scale along with the HALT acronym can give you some good information on what's happening during that episode of eating. To kind of summarize again, eating mindfully, it is doing nothing else while eating. It's slowing down and savoring each bite, using all your senses to appreciate the food. Identifying, as we did earlier, what are some non-hunger triggers that cause me to eat? And how might I manage those triggers? How might I change that behavior chain, that domino effect, so I don't end up with feelings of negative self-talk or I failed? Where can you break a link to help with more mindful eating? that hunger scale and the HALT acronym, using that to kind of recognize how hungry am I when I start to eat and when I'm done eating, and noticing more that sense of fullness or satiety. When does that set in? And planning for not only to be a mindful eater, but planning for healthy choices. Using that the plate method. Am I getting those fruits in, vegetables in daily, some grains, some protein sources, balancing that plate out, balancing that plate out. There are some additional resources available. You can, from the Wellbeing Central. So as Bridget mentioned early on, that you can access resources through Wellbeing Central. And I want to leave, before we go to some questions and answers, with the words here: be present while eating. So mindful eating, be in the present moment when you're eating. So I want to thank you very much for your attention on this topic of mindful eating. And now we have some time for questions and answers, Bridget. And I hope you'll take some of these nutrition nuggets with you when the next time you're eating.
Thank you, Margaret. So question, what recommendations do you have for remote workers when they're constantly in an environment of food?
So I would say, creating that healthy environment. I'm working also from home, and I have my desk is in an area that's not easy access. So just making sure wherever you are maybe doing the remote work, hopefully maybe isn't right on your kitchen table, perhaps, where you have easy access to the food. I think also setting boundaries, like saying I will only eat at this certain time. If you have a schedule, even when to have a schedule at work at home is important as well as at work. So I think identifying set times you're going to eat and set places to eat. I think what can happen is that if we start associating, like, oh, I'm eating in my office, and oh, I'm going to go eat in the family room or in the dining room and over in this room, we start to almost associate every room of the house with eating, right? So identifying a certain spot that this is only where I'm going to eat, and then having the tempting foods, like my nuts discussion, having those tempting foods not so visible, even at your workstation at home. If you're having food around your computer area, put it out of sight, out of mind. So creating that healthy environment at home is going to take some time to look at what are my triggers. Do I need to move my computer? Do I need to keep some of those trigger foods, out of sight, out of mind?
Do you have any recommendations if there is a certain food that you really enjoy, whether it's chocolate or, as you, in your case, nuts?
The nuts.
What are some steps to take to help you with that, with a certain food that you really, really enjoy, but you might need to just give it up or not have it in the house?
So as I mentioned, my solution to the nuts, I tried to do the distraction approach and hide it in a cupboard. That didn't work. So finally, I had to do the confrontation approach and confront that I felt the nuts were controlling me, and the best option for me was not to have them in the house. If, however, you say, well, that I'm never going to eat nuts again, or I'm never going to eat chocolate again is not going to work for you, then I would honestly do that mindful eating experience, that you take that piece of chocolate, and it's those first couple bites that I think you enjoy most. And you really take that bite of chocolate and you put it in your mouth and you just let it sit there for a while, and you taste that richness of that chocolate, and just practicing taking time to really enjoy that food that you really love. And you may find that if you're eating it that slowly and really savoring it, that you're like, you know what? I'm okay with one, maybe two pieces of chocolate. Okay.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you so much, Margaret. And I love the mantra, don't let a lapse become a
A
collapse.
collapse.
Yeah, and the importance of just practicing self-compassion with ourselves as we're trying to make changes with mindful eating as well. So thank you everyone for attending today's workshop.